My best friend slept with my wife. It was just a mistake, they pleaded. I just laughed and said, "You two deserve each other." Now, he's begging me to hear him out. I moved on, but he won't take no for an answer. I, 35M, married my wife, Lisa, 32F, almost 8 years ago. We had a pretty solid relationship, the kind people would look at and think, they've got it figured out. There were always the normal ups and downs, sure, but nothing that ever seemed like it would break us apart. In fact, a lot of people even said we were the perfect couple. Things started to change when my best friend, Sam, 34M, moved back to town. Sam and I grew up together. We were inseparable, doing everything together as kids and later as young adults. He had moved away for a few years, but now he was back and I was excited. I knew Lisa was looking forward to reconnecting with him too. They had always gotten along, and I didn't think twice about it. But after a while, things started to feel off. At first, I chalked it up to my own insecurities. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But as time went on, I started noticing little things. I'd come home from work, and Lisa and Sam would still be hanging out, even though I knew they didn't have any plans. Sometimes, I'd come in to find them laughing at some inside joke, or Sam would casually throw an arm around her shoulder. I'd brush it off as nothing, telling myself I was being dramatic. But one day, things reached a point I couldn't ignore. I came home early from work, planning to surprise Lisa with a nice dinner. I had the whole night planned out, but when I walked in, I saw something I couldn't unsee. Lisa and Sam were sitting together on the couch, way too close. His hand was on her thigh, and they looked up at me in shock when I walked in. Sam immediately stood up, but Lisa froze. Her face went pale, and it was like time stopped for a second. I stood there, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to understand if I was imagining it. I asked them what was going on. Sam stammered out something, but before he could finish, Lisa looked down and said it. We slept together. She said it like it was the most casual thing in the world, like it was no big deal. Sam started apologizing immediately, saying it was a mistake, that it wasn't supposed to happen, that they regretted it. But I just laughed. It was the only reaction I could muster. It was so absurd, so far beyond anything I ever imagined happening, that all I could do was laugh. "You two deserve each other," I said, without thinking. And I meant it. I didn't want to hear any excuses, any apologies. I was done. Lisa started crying, begging me to stay, to talk through it. She said it was a mistake, that she loved me, but I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. Sam kept apologizing, trying to explain himself, but I just couldn't hear it. I didn't want to. I told them both that I was done. I left the house and went to stay with my parents, needing some space to clear my head. That's when everything spiraled. A few days later, Sam started sending me texts, begging for me to talk to him, to understand. He said he valued our friendship and didn't want to lose it. But how could I ever look at him the same way again? I couldn't shake the image of him with my wife. I told him I didn't want to talk, that I needed space. But the messages kept coming. "Please, hear me out," he'd write. "I messed up. I never meant to hurt you." But honestly, I couldn't care less. The trust was gone, and I didn't think I'd ever get it back. I started to focus on myself, going to therapy, trying to figure out what I was even supposed to do next. But every time I tried to move on, Sam kept popping up. He would show up at my parents' house, calling, texting. At one point, he even showed up at work, trying to talk it out. It was exhausting. And the worst part was, the rest of my family was giving me mixed messages. My sister, 28F, was furious with me. She said I was being dramatic, that I should have heard Sam out, that mistakes happen, and that maybe I overreacted. She even told me that I was throwing away a long friendship over one mistake. But I couldn't understand how she didn't see it. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. I had trusted both of them, and they'd broken that trust. How could I just forgive that? My mom, 55F, was upset, too. She kept saying I was too harsh and that I should be more understanding. No relationship is perfect, she said. You can't just throw it all away over something like this. It was like she couldn't see the bigger picture. This wasn't a small issue. This was a complete violation of everything I thought was sacred in our relationship. And my dad, 60M, he was on my side, but it felt like he was just saying that because he didn't want to get involved in family drama. The more I tried to explain why I was done with both of them, the more people seemed to pressure me into reconsidering. But I just didn't know how. Every time I looked at Sam's face, every time I thought about the situation, I just felt disgusted. Lisa was still calling, too, sending me texts begging for forgiveness. But I couldn't bring myself to even acknowledge them. I had told her what I needed, space. But she couldn't respect that. Then, a couple of weeks later, I filed for divorce. I didn't want to, but it felt like the only option left. My family was disappointed, saying that I should have tried harder to salvage the marriage. I was tired of trying to explain myself, but then Sam texted me again. This time, he said, "I'm really sorry. I understand if you never want to talk to me again, but please, I need to explain myself." I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I knew I was done with both of them, but on the other hand, my family kept pushing me to hear him out. I went back and forth on what to do. Part of me wanted to just block Sam completely and move on with my life. I'd already made my decision about the marriage, and honestly, I didn't need any more reminders of what had happened. But another part of me, a small part, wondered if I was making a mistake. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe this was just one of those situations where I needed to forgive and forget. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about trust. And trust, in my mind, was something that couldn't just be given back after it had been shattered like that. How could I trust either of them again? How could I look at Sam, my best friend for over 20 years, and not think about what he did? How could I look at Lisa, my wife, and not see what had happened? Sam started showing up at my parents' house uninvited. My mom kept letting him in, and I could tell she was starting to feel bad for him. He was really laying it on thick, telling her how much he regretted everything. But I couldn't deal with it. I just kept getting angrier and angrier, and I didn't want to be around it any more. One night, my mom called me up and said, "You need to talk to Sam. He's really hurting, and if you don't hear him out, you might lose him for good." I remember feeling a mix of frustration and exhaustion. I didn't care about losing Sam. The friendship felt like it was already gone, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want it back. But my mom's words stuck with me. Could I really just let go of a friendship that had been a huge part of my life for so long? But then I thought about what had been said before. I thought about the way Sam had acted, the way he seemed to not fully grasp the weight of what he had done. If he truly cared about me, he wouldn't have slept with my wife in the first place. And yet, here he was begging for my forgiveness like it was just another problem to fix. I wasn't sure I could accept that. A few days later, Sam called again. This time, he sounded more desperate than before. He said he would do anything to make it right. "Just talk to me," he pleaded. "Please, I don't want to lose you as my best friend." I thought about it for a while, but honestly, my gut just told me to walk away. There was no way I could go back to that friendship. I couldn't pretend that what happened hadn't happened. I couldn't forget the betrayal at this point. I started cutting off people who were making me feel guilty about my decision. I blocked Sam on everything: phone, social media, email. It felt good to finally have some peace. But even then, I couldn't escape the pressure from my family. My sister kept calling, saying I was being unfair to Sam. She even accused me of being too prideful to admit that I needed him. "You've always been the type to shut people out," she said. "But this is different. Don't let your pride destroy everything." I didn't want to listen to her. It was clear that she didn't understand what I was going through. She wasn't the one who had been betrayed. She wasn't the one who had lost everything in one moment. She wasn't the one who had to look at their best friend and their wife and see the people they trusted the most stab them in the back. And then my mom, who had been so insistent on me talking to Sam, pulled me aside one afternoon. She said something I'll never forget. "You have to forgive, son. It's the only way to move on." She tried to convince me that holding on to anger would only hurt me in the long run. But again, it felt like she was missing the point. This wasn't just about moving on. It wasn't about holding on to anger for the sake of anger. It was about setting boundaries and not letting people walk all over me. But the guilt kept creeping in. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I was throwing everything away over something that could be forgiven with time. It wasn't like I didn't care about Sam or even Lisa. I did. But the betrayal was too much. I kept thinking about how I would never be able to look at them the same way. I'd always wonder if something else was going on behind my back. Still, I couldn't escape the fact that my family, especially my sister, made me feel like I was wrong for feeling the way I did. One day, after a particularly heated conversation with my sister, I went for a walk to clear my head. I thought about everything: my marriage, my friendship, my family. It felt like I was caught in the middle of a tug-of-war between my past and my future, with no clear answer. As I walked, I realized something. There wasn't a simple right or wrong answer here. There was no magic moment where everything would go back to normal, no perfect resolution where everyone would be happy. What I realized was that it was about me. It was about what I could live with and what I couldn't. And right now, I couldn't live with any of it. I spent the next few days really reflecting on everything. The guilt and doubt were still there, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't let anyone else dictate how I felt or what I needed to do. I had spent so much time trying to make everyone else happy, trying to hold on to relationships that weren't serving me anymore. It was time for me to put myself first. I ended up cutting off contact with Lisa, too. I still loved her, in a way, but I couldn't live in a marriage where I didn't feel safe emotionally anymore. I couldn't look at her without remembering what she did. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the breach of trust, the dishonesty, and the fact that she'd chosen someone else over me. She begged me to reconsider, just like Sam had, but I stuck to my decision. I needed peace, and I knew it wasn't going to come from holding on to this relationship anymore. Over the next few months, I started rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy, but I started to focus on things that made me happy, spending more time with my dad, getting back into hobbies I had neglected, and even going on a few dates. I realized that I could still have a future, and it didn't have to include people who had hurt me. But, of course, things weren't all smooth sailing. My sister kept pushing me to reach out to Sam, saying things like, "He's your best friend. You'll regret this one day." I don't think she fully understood that, to me. Sam wasn't just my best friend anymore. He was someone who had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. My mom kept trying to mediate between us, telling me I needed to be the bigger person and forgive Sam for the sake of our friendship. But every time I thought about it, I couldn't shake the feeling that forgiving him would mean I was allowing him to get away with something he'd done to me. I knew I'd never be able to trust him again, and the thought of pretending like everything was okay made me sick. It wasn't until I had a conversation with my dad that I realized I had to stop seeking everyone else's approval. He didn't say much, but his words stuck with me. You don't have to forgive people just because they want you to. You have to do it for yourself, when you're ready. It felt like a weight was lifted. It was okay not to forgive, at least not yet. And if that meant losing Sam and Lisa forever, then so be it. The final straw came when Sam sent me one last message. It was a long, tear-filled apology, and in it, he said that he understood if we could never be friends again, but he still hoped I would forgive him someday. I didn't reply, and I didn't feel an ounce of regret about it. My family still thinks I'm being harsh. They still think I should have given Sam a chance to explain, that maybe I should have been more understanding. But I know in my heart that I did the right thing. I'm not saying it was easy, but sometimes you have to draw a line. And that's what I did. So, am I the a-hole for cutting both of them out of my life? Should I have given Sam and Lisa a chance to explain? Or did I handle things the right way? I know I might come off as harsh to some people, but after everything that happened, I really feel like it's the only choice I had. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Was the OP justified in cutting both of them out of their life? Or did they overreact? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story interesting, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this.